Somebody's got a phone a little close to a microphone. Good evening. At 6 o'clock, I'll call to order the workshop for the Arvada City Council for December 11th, 2017. Mr. Devon, we've got a few items on the calendar tonight. Do you want to lead us off?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the first item is the Denver Water's planned projects at Rawson Reservoir, and we'll have Jim Sullivan, Director of Utilities, give you an introduction to this item.
Very good.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight we'll have a presentation from Denver Water staff. We have Katie Knoll, who is the Communication Relations Manager, and Melissa Brassfield, who is the Communication Relations Coordinator for Gross Reservoir. Denver has a number of projects that are going on at Rawson Reservoir and Gross Reservoir, which will total close to $1 billion over the next decade. And with that introduction, Melissa's up first.
Good evening.
Good evening. So as Jim introduced, I'm Melissa Brassfield, the Communications Coordinator for the Gross Reservoir Expansion Project. Kick this off. So to give you guys an idea, the North System Renewal is a large capital improvement project that Denver Water has going on in Jefferson County in the city of Arvada. The first portion of that I'll be talking about is the Gross Reservoir Expansion Project. So I just wanted to give our thanks for supporting both of these projects. So the city of Arvada has been a huge supporter of these, and I just want to from Denver Water and the Gross Reservoir Expansion Project team and the North System Renewal team, just say thank you for that support. We hope that it continues and that it'll increase popularity.
We're talking to our friends in Boulder all the time.
So to give you guys an idea, and for the folks in the room who might not know exactly where these two projects are happening, the project on the south side of that map is the Rawson Reservoir site, which is where the North System Renewal will be going on, as well as a new water treatment facility, which Katie will go into a little bit later. And then on the north end where that red arrow is pointing, that's Gross Reservoir. So we'll be expanding that reservoir to create a little bit more storage in the north end of Denver Water's system.
Yes.
The screen is not lit up, and it's pretty difficult for me to turn back. I'm wondering if somebody might fix the screen. If that's anybody here can do that quickly. I don't know if there's just an on-off button, or we have the director of IT here.
No, but Mr. Pfeiffer could fix it, I bet. We bought these used from Denver Water. So. What's the warranty these days?
If it's not going to work, I can make a change. There. Okay, we are in business. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the interruption.
Oh, that's not a problem at all. So I'll just go over some information for you guys just to give you an update on where we are in the project. So the existing facility was built between 1951 and 1955. It's a 340-foot tall gravity arch dam. It holds about roughly 42,000 acre-feet of water is the current storage capacity, and it was originally designed for a dam raise. So when it was first designed back in the 50s, it was placed in such a place or in such a location in the canyon that with that dam raise, it would tie in really nicely with some of the rock formations in the area. To give you an idea, hydropower was added to Gross Dam in 2007, and the outlet works were added in 1977. So it's been a very good facility for Denver Water over the years. However, with a growing population throughout the metro area, we need more water. So these are three of our sort of large overarching project goals. So the first one is to do the right thing, and that goes across the board, doing the right thing in a safety perspective, being as safe as we can, being good neighbors to the communities that we're going to be impacting, and then also doing the right thing when it comes to the environment. So there's no going around it. This is going to have an impact on the environment, but we're doing everything we can to minimize and mitigate those impacts. Second, like I said, creating a more secure water supply. You guys being partners and supporters of the project, you can understand having that secure water supply for your customers and constituents. And then the last project goal is completing it by 2025. So that's a project that, given where we're at in our timeline, is still a goal that we can reach without any issue. And then this is just a graphic that we've put together to give you guys some idea of where the dam is from a sort of stats and figures perspective. The dam raise is 131 feet, so it'll end up being 471 feet tall. And it'll about triple the capacity, so it'll be increasing from 42,000 acre feet to 119,000 acre feet. And then next I'll go over some of the environmental benefits. So in the packet that we had handed out to you guys is this graphic as well as another one, so you can maybe get a closer look at that. So this is just a sampling of the projects that we have going on. So because of partnerships and agreements that we've made across the state, we've been able to commit to a lot of projects that will, from what the state of Colorado says, have a net environmental benefit on the state. So it's about $20 million in projects that we have committed to from an environmental perspective. Two of those that I'll point out on this that are probably closest to home is the environmental pool, which is a 5,000 acre foot storage inside the reservoir that is basically going to be used for low winter flows in South Boulder Creek. And then the South Boulder Creek Restoration Project, which will be a partnership with the city of Boulder and us to restore about a 2-mile stretch of South Boulder Creek. So those are two kind of right in our backyards or close to us of those more than $20 million of projects that we have. So next is just kind of the accomplishments that we've had over the past couple years. This handout is also on the backside of that environmental handout that you have. So this basically goes over the last few years, just highlighting the major accomplishments and the major partnerships and agreements that we've made to kind of have this project happen, as well as looking forward to what we have going on in the next few years. So this gives you an idea between now and 2025, 2026, when we'll be wrapping up with the project, what we have going on. So next year is going to be a really busy year for us with getting final dam design done. We'll be starting our test quarry and getting the site ready for construction. Construction will actually start in 2021 and last until 2023. And then we'll be doing some site cleanup and sort of getting the space ready to be released back out of construction mode. And with this timeline, we're confident that any outstanding permits that we have, we're optimistic that we won't have any major issues receiving those. And nothing will majorly impact this timeline that we can foresee, and we're optimistic on the future and keeping this schedule on track. So that's all that I have as far as the Gross Reservoir Expansion Project. I'll turn it over to Katie, and she can go over some more of the North System Renewal Project at Rawson.
I'm so much taller than Melissa. If you guys have any questions about the Gross Reservoir Project, please let us know, and Melissa can address those. I recognize quite a few of you from our tour back in October when we took a look at the North System, which is basically everything else on that list after Gross Reservoir. So I'll touch on those, and let me know if you have any questions. So this is just an overview of the whole system. The project spans Jefferson County, Arvada, Lakewood, and Wheat Ridge. Starting up in the top left-hand corner there is our Rawson Reservoir project. We're going to be replacing some of the aging pipelines and valves inside the dam. And then the dotted line there is the North Water Treatment Plant. And then the blue line there is we're going to be replacing the pipeline, the current pipeline system that carries raw water from Rawson Reservoir down to our Moffett facility to be treated. We're going to be replacing that entire 8.5-mile long pipeline with an 84-inch conduit that's going to carry the treated water from North Water down to the Moffett facility, and we will transition the Moffett facility into more of a storage and distribution, a link to our system to get that water out. This is just we have lots of maps for you to kind of get it, since this project is so enormous. This one kind of just gives you a little bit more perspective on how it impacts Arvada. So you can see at the top there's Rawson Reservoir and the North Water Treatment Plant's the top blue dot there. The conduit project, or the North Water Pipeline project right there, really only cuts through the bottom half of it. Looks like Council District 4, which I think is Councilman Jones' district. So we'll be impacting that little bottom part of your district, and then really not much more in Arvada. You can see North Table Mountain Water and Sand. We're working very closely with them, as we are with your staff, on a lot of the water delivery issues. And then that's District 1 right there is County Commissioner Lizzie Zabel from Jefferson County. It's mostly in her district, and then we creep down into Wheat Ridge and Lakewood there. So just to give you a little bit more perspective, Arvada's constituents won't be very directly affected by the actual construction, but I imagine they will be driving around a lot in this area and see some traffic impacts and some detours as we start to get into construction a little bit.
Just a quick question.
Yep.
So that, obviously that line, does it follow a major road, or is it cutting through?
No.
So you're going through backyards?
Yeah.
And
There's about 150 landowners on there, a mix of commercial and residential, a lot of residential as you get down there past I-70 there into Wheat Ridge and Lakewood. They're pretty packed in there. We've met with all of those property owners at their homes, gone over that we have an 80-foot easement where all that infrastructure is, and luckily it doesn't like run through anyone's home, so we lucked out there, but it does come kind of close in some areas. So we are working with all of those landowners as we kind of move through that project. It will be very impactful for them, but.
And I'm assuming that up on that small piece of District 4, there's not, is that running at all through Spring Mesa, or is that still going to be on city-owned property?
I'm not sure exactly what is up there. It's pretty
Along
much open up there. I don't think there's a lot of, it's because it's right by the reservoir. Oh, Jim, do you know? Great.
Right. It will go through the water treatment plant area, that part of the Arvada Reservoir, and then it will go into the Long Lake Ranch section.
Okay.
It doesn't really touch any
Homeowners.
of our homeowners at that point.
Okay.
And hopefully it doesn't affect any of the soccer fields or other fields that have gone in for,
We've been very respectful of Denver's 80-foot right-of-way.
so we have not encroached upon the easement that we've always known was there.
Correct.
Great.
And this is as straight as a arrow there because they initially put this stuff in back in the 1920s and nothing else was out there.
Right. Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate that.
That is one of my talking points, so thank you, Jim. This is very old, and he's right. There was mostly agricultural land all the way up to Moffett, and now we have homes built all the way around our Moffett fence line. So thank you to Arvada for paying attention to the easement, but a lot of people haven't since then. And I'll just run you through the projects really quickly. The Rawson Reservoir connection, as I said, we're replacing some of the pipelines and valves in the reservoir. This does affect the water service that we provide to Arvada, so we've been working very closely with Jim and Cliff on this as we kind of figure out how we're going to time this project. The timeline for this piece is still a little bit up in the air. They're trying to schedule it so it corresponds with some of the other project pieces. Also, I'd like to tee up that we will have to drain the reservoir to do this project. We don't have a real timeline for that either, but people notice that, and it's a pretty big deal. So I like to tee that up in advance that will have to happen, but we don't have a solid timeline for this quite yet.
A couple of issues we've had in the past. First, everybody gets very worried about the fish.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you permit fishing there now or not?
No, there's no fishing at Rawson Reservoir.
So as you drain it, the birds will go crazy.
Yeah, and it's not, I don't think it's stocked either, which is obviously because there's no fishing there. So I think they all just kind of flow out with the water, although that's not my area.
We had an issue with a small pond lake Tucker Lake, where we drained it, and there was a lot of dust.
Yeah. Oh, dust. Yes.
Will you do dust mitigation as part of?
Yeah, I talk a little bit about mitigation of impacts at the end, but yeah, dust, noise, traffic, those are all things that we're going to be working on with all these projects as we move through.
Right.
Let's see. Then here's the treatment plant. This is one of our new renderings. This treatment plant is going to operate pretty similarly to the other treatment plants in our system. This view is actually looking from the top of Rawson Dam down onto the property, and you can see Highway 93 there in the top left corner. Just for your information, the treatment plant is going to be designed to treat about 150 million gallons a day, max capacity. The treatment process is going to be we designed, actually, let me back up a little bit. It's 150 million gallons a day, and we designed it for our need currently. So we designed it for what our needs are now. We would be able to expand this if in the future we do need more capacity there, we would be able to do that. We would need some equipment upgrades and some construction on the facility to do that. But for right now, that's what it's designed to do. The treatment process is, as I said, pretty similar to the other treatment plants, except we have a few technology advances and some upgrades. We are going to be using chlorine bleach in the treatment process here, which is easier to, or safer to transport and store on site. Our other treatment plants use a chlorine gas, which is a little bit more hazardous. Also at this treatment plant, we'll be installing ultraviolet treatment. It's just an upgraded disinfection. It catches some unexpected contaminants that might occur in the water. It's also really great against Giardia and Cryptosporidium and that kind of stuff. Additionally, in the design, we're going to be bringing hydropower onto this site. This is either the only one of very few or the only one that does not have hydropower of Denver Water's facilities. So we'll be bringing hydropower onto the site. We also designed this facility to be minimal space, water, energy, low CO2 emissions. We were really conscious of our environmental footprint here. Additionally, the designers are aware that there will be a visual impact here. So in addition to being energy efficient, we are also aware of the visual impact. So we did bury a lot of these buildings. So I'll show you on the next slide. There's another rendering that kind of shows how to look. We tried to make it as less visually impactful to folks because people are used to not really seeing anything. So having a treatment plant is going to be a new thing. And then, as I said, we are working really closely with Arvada on a lot of logistics here, working around utilities, making sure we keep you guys in water. So this is another rendering. This view is as if you were driving north to south on Highway 93. So you'll see, renderings aren't, the best way to provide visuals, but you can see some of the buildings kind of popping up over the hilly part at the front of the property there, but we tried our best to hide them as much as we could. And really, this is the only, driving this route is kind of the only way that you're going to see it. If you're coming actually from south to north, you won't really be able to see that. So this is kind of the only area you'll be able to see the treatment plant buildings. And then also the traffic on Highway 93, we did a traffic study that estimated about 17,000, 24,000 vehicles per day on the highway. We estimate adding about 1,400 vehicles to that during construction. And then we also are creating an access road at the Asphalt Paving Company driveway, which is a little bit south of the property because our entrance at Rawson currently isn't suitable for this kind of construction traffic. So we worked out an agreement with the Asphalt Paving Company to use their driveway, and we're going to access our property through there, but we will need a stoplight at that access point. That will be a temporary stoplight. It will be taken away once construction is done. It will also be censored, so it will only come on when a construction vehicle of some kind needs to turn into that driveway. And then finally, once we're done here, we expect only to add about 60 vehicles per day-ish once the plant's operational to that traffic flow on Highway 93. Let's see. Then the North Water Pipeline, as I said, replacing, right now we have 2 small conduits running down from Rawson to Moffett with raw water to be treated at Moffett. We're going to replace that with an 84-inch conduit that will carry the treated water down to Moffett. And really the one thing you need to know about this is we have started construction on that pipeline as of this year. There's a fact sheet in your packet there that talks about the tunnels. We have started work on tunneling under some of the street intersections and railroad intersections in various locations. I think there's 7 to 9-ish locations. We've started on 2 up at I-70. If you guys have seen that activity up by Applewood Shopping Center, that's us, and Highway 58. So again, I don't think that Arvada's citizens will run into too much impact here, maybe a couple detours, maybe a little bit of traffic here and there.
So does the water board get along better with the railroads than cities and the rest of us?
Absolutely not. We just had a huge delay on one of our permits that set us back. So
why does that
they
not
don't
surprise
respond
you?
to us any better. We're second worst to the railroad, though, so.
Yeah.
They're older than us, the only people that are older than us.
If you were a ditch company, you'd have,
Yeah. And then the last piece is just us kind of retrofitting and upgrading that Moffett site to become more of a storage and distribution center, kind of taking away all the treatment processes and just making sure we can link up to our system appropriately for when we store that treated water down there. Last couple slides just about being a good neighbor, as Melissa mentioned. They're very conscious of that up at Gross. We're conscious of that with all of these projects. Obviously, safety is our #1 priority. We also are doing everything that we can to minimize noise, dust, and traffic, especially, once we really get down into those neighborhoods. I'm usually going to be the primary point of contact, and we really try to work around the best we can. We obviously can't eliminate those impacts, but, neighbors and the community are welcome to call us. We will do the best that we can to work around what they need us to do. And the best thing that I have found that we can do to help people out is to communicate regularly with them, and that will be largely my job. I've already started by reaching out to all the public information officers in all the districts, including Arvada. I've spoken with Maria several times. And I'm also sending out packets of information. I just sent one last week that has fact sheets, the map on the website, talking points, pictures, anything that they can maybe use to send out through your channels. And like Melissa said, you guys have been great about putting all that stuff out there because we can't reach everyone on our own. So it really helps to have you guys sending out that information for us. And then this is just the end, and I will take this opportunity to plug my website since I'm last, but the most helpful thing on our website is this map we just created. All those points there are clickable on the construction sites, and you can pull that up, and I have updates in there that I update regularly that I think will be more helpful than me trying to get mailings out to people. This can be updated in real time so people can just click on it and find out what's happening. And there's also a bunch of fact sheets and other information on there, as well as grossreservoir.org has all the information in your packet and a ton more. So if you're interested in more information, there's plenty to be had. And that's it. So if you have any questions for Melissa or I, we're happy to answer them.
Mr. Jones?
Just a question on the light that you said you needed installed along Highway 93. I'm assuming that CDOT's already approved that?
Yeah, I believe they are the ones that required it
Okay.
after the traffic study. So yeah, I'm not sure if it's final approval. It might still be waiting on their final approval, but they are involved.
And you might have said this, and I apologize if you did, because I wasn't listening, that
Oh,
means.
that's okay.
What's
I
your
talk
time?
fast.
What's your timeline on this? When does this
Oh,
project
sorry.
begin?
Okay, so construction on the North Water Treatment Plant
Yeah.
itself should begin sometime next year. There's no exact date for that, and then it will be operational by 2023.
Okay.
And we already started construction on the pipeline project this year with the tunnels. We'll be starting the west phase of that segment, actually, that hits your district there a little bit. We're bidding that out in January, so we'll start construction on that sometime, second quarter, third quarter maybe of next year. And that should be done, I think, on the same timeline around 2023. They kind of all overlap each other that way.
So it would be helpful if, as that project begins to get closer and closer, if you could provide information that we could put out in the Arvada report and any communication that we have to
Absolutely.
citizens out in that area, just so that they're aware of what's going on.
Yeah, and I would love it if you would do that. So I will get you as much as I can.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Mr. Marriott?
More of a comment than a question, but I just wanted to say thank you for the tour that you took us on. Seeing it in person helps, see what's really going on there, and two, it feels like you're doing a really good job on both of these projects, both Gross Reservoir and the pipeline project, and all of them with communicating, and I would just encourage you to keep it up. That pipeline project right through town is an amazing project, and I can see how that can be really difficult. I know several people who were very near it, and nobody's squawking about it. I mean, they all feel like they know what's going on and know what you're trying to do, and that you're trying to do everything the right way. So I would encourage you, just as the project moves forward, to keep that going, keep that attitude, because it looks like it's going
Yeah,
good.
we'll do the best we can, although I imagine they'll get squawkier as we get closer to the digging. But thank you.
And if one of you, with regard to the Gross Reservoir project, can talk about the amount of water that Arvada is going to directly get from that, in terms of the acre feet that Arvada is entitled to. I know Jim probably knows the answer.
It's 3,000 acre-feet of water. It should be enough to get us to build out.
And that's always been the discussion, is that both between conservation, which is important to have go on.
Conservation in this project, we will be enough water for build out in about 50 years.
Very good. Okay, I don't see any other questions. One last comment. This city council has been huge advocates for the Gross Reservoir project for years, and in fact, several of us in trips going back to Washington, D.C. have pounded on tables in outrage over the process and how long it takes to go through the permitting process at the federal level. And we've talked to the governor, we've talked to our delegation, and it's great to see that it's finally coming to fruition. It is a much-needed project. I think you all have done a great job of mitigating the impacts on the surrounding community, and frankly, you're going to give us all a great amenity that's going to be just another treasure in our foothills. So thank you for your work, and we look forward to continued updates and reports and seeing this project finally come to fruition. Thank you. Have a good evening. Next, we'll move on to the procurement update. Mr. Devon?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my pleasure to introduce this item. Brian Archer will lead off our procurement update, which involves our process improvement. Before you, we'll be explaining some of the things and steps that we implemented, as well as some recommended changes to our purchasing ordinance that we'd like to discuss with you tonight. So with that, Brian will take it away.
Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity to come talk to you about some exciting changes that we're hoping to make with our procurement process. I do want to introduce Nancy Allen. She's our new purchasing manager.
Oh, hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We'll talk a little bit more about what Nancy has brought to us from the judicial organization. I know Mr. Devon put a little bit of the background related to this procurement change or proposed change in his Friday memo. I would like to review that with you tonight and kind of talk a little bit about where we are today and what we are moving forward. So we did go through a process improvement. We are looking at some changes related to our ordinance. Did come up with a justification. Do have a desired state and a future state. Would like to share with you our analysis, and ultimately, if City Council is open to this, what performance measures we would like to implement to make sure we're doing what we say we're going to do. A little bit of quick history. In 2011, we changed the purchasing ordinance to require any kind of modification, any kind of award, or any kind of termination of a contract for goods or services greater than $50,000 to come to City Council through a resolution for final approval. We did allow the city manager and any of his designees to approve items less than $50,000, and we did create a complex modification process. What we have heard in the meantime from our customers meaning our internal and external, that this created some undue frustrations. Starting about 2 years ago, Finance polled internal staff to see what we could change. And what we heard is that staff wanted a more robust purchasing process. They wanted help from our purchasing staff. I failed to mention one of the other items we did in 2011 is we went decentralized. So we asked each department to run their own purchasing process, creating frustrations, obviously, creating workarounds and those kinds of items. Jump forward to a couple years ago, departments requested that we would look at making a change. We were lucky enough to hire Nancy. She comes to us from the judicial, a certified purchasing manager, one of the few in the state, brought some best business practices with her. We started looking at ways to change the process. Realizing that we needed help to push this ball over the top of the hill, our ninja team put together a group across 8 different departments and spent 2 days working on identifying various items in our process. I do want to say waste is identified in our procurement process as time waiting, both from a vendor perspective and staff perspective, not engaging appropriate staff, excess motion, doing too many items at once, and excess processing. We performed a process map, performed a current and future state, which we will see here in the next couple of slides, and then came up with different varying recommendations. We also put time to that process map. As it sits today, the time to go through need to purchase can be upwards of 3.5 months. This includes the solicitation, contract, and then the resolution process to City Council. Feeling like that was a little too long, we looked at ways to cut back. You can't read this. I don't think anybody can. and I apologize for that. But what we can show is the current process requires 51 steps. Our two new processes, one for what we are going to call the formal purchasing process, and one that we are going to call informal or documented quote, is 9 steps. Quite excited about this. Let me talk to you about what we see and how we can make improvements. To justify our changes, we ran 2 paths. One was to take a look at all of the contracts and purchase orders that went to City Council for approval from that point in April through this past July, divided them up by varying amounts, also reviewed all the City Council notes to see if any of these contracts were not approved or if we had any disputes. So for you that are numbers, you can see the chart below. For you like myself that like to read things on graphics, you can see that a majority of these items fell under $250,000, with what we call a sweet spot around $150,000, or 41% of the items were less than $150,000 that came to City Council for approval. I spoke a little bit already about the time savings, but we took the opportunity to put a time map to each one of those steps that you saw earlier. Current state takes approximately 108 days, or 3.5 months. Our proposed future state, 56 days, or 1.5 months. While the purchasing process improvement team was doing that research, Nancy was taking the opportunity to benchmark as many metro cities as she could in questioning how do they do their council approval process, if they do one, and how and what levels do they have, and do they also do what we're going to call a documented quote, or a level that's below formal but still requires some sort of a process. This chart is representative of the results that she received. 6 out of the 9 cities do not require additional approval for items that were in a budget. 3 do require additional approval, including ourselves. We are the lowest, currently at $50,000. Westminster is next at $75,000, and Loveland at less than $500,000. On the documented quote side of things, seems like every city makes the lowest level $5,000. Anything above $5,000 should have some sort of active process. Many take that up to $25,000 and some up to $50,000. We currently are sitting at $15,000. So internally, the recommendation was that we should look at something around $150,000 to speed up the process. Remember, to reduce waste, as waste was defined in this purchasing process improvement. We did notice that City Council approved 100% of the resolutions that came to City Council. Now, there were some resolutions that were pulled before approval and needed some work, and so they did not come back formally. We're happy to report that there were no appeals and no litigation with any of those. We talked a little bit about what our external review called for. So that leads us up to our desired state and what we're presenting to City Council tonight. We would like to propose that we raise the limit for the city manager to $150,000, that we would put in an additional level of authority at $100,000, requiring anything greater than $100,000 for the deputies to have signed off on. Anything below $100,000 could be approved by the department head. We are also asking City Council if they would consider raising the limits on the documented quotes from $5,015 to $5,050. We'd also propose changing the modification process to a standard 15% of the original contract, no greater than the individual's approval authority. Meaning, if you wanted to change the contract upwards of $155,000, that would have to come back to City Council. This would net us a time savings of approximately 2 months. It would standardize the process. We are currently working on what we're going to call our purchasing enhanced model, where we have our expert purchasing staff work day to day with our departments and create the greatest team we can create. Use the purchasing staff's expertise to make sure the process is run fairly and appropriately. Use the department's expertise to get the appropriate scope. Leveraging our legal department and making sure we can get our contracts done in an appropriate time and manner. We're also proposing additional financial controls. We would like to create for City Council an activity report that you would receive every Friday. This report would show items that were purchased and approved between $50,000 and $150,000, items that are routine in nature and that are already in the budget. If an item is outside of the budget, if we received a grant to buy something new, it is our expectation that City Council would get that ability to approve that resolution, irrespective of the dollar figure. If it's a $25,000 grant, we would come to you. It is not something that was in our budget. This would help us reduce the process time from 3.5 months to 1.8 months. It would also increase our financial controls. We would share with council in an open environment all the items that were approved. If City Council had any questions about them, we would bring them to you. A few examples of some of the commodities we're talking about. You can read those. These are the 3 performance measures, if this change would be to be approved, that we would like to monitor and track. Number of hours saved for items between 50 and 150. The average time frame from request to completion for items less than 150, a performance measure for purchasing department and the finance department. And the percentage of all purchase orders on an annual basis that have documentation. One of the changes that we would be proposing on the documented quote, the items that were between 5 and 50, is that the departments would have to attach the minimum 3 that they are required to get to the purchase order and route it for approval before being able to come to agreement. These items would be attached electronically and in our system for view by anybody. Of course, we will continue to analyze this process and are coming to City Council in a workshop environment to get your opinion. Any questions we can answer?
Open up for questions. Mr. Jones, you're first.
Thank you. A couple of questions. The documented quote limits, help me understand. I'm struggling a little bit trying to understand that and what that means.
Yes, thank you for asking. We are not inventing too many things. I think Mr. Devin gave me a nice compliment the other night and said revolutionizing purchasing here in Arvada. The reality is we're kind of bringing Arvada up to where all of the other cities are, with the exception of Westminster, and not to bash them, but they're in a very decentralized environment, so they really can't do, their limits are similar to ours. We're still lower, but it's similar. The documented quote is 3 quotes that can either be done by your purchasing department or by the department itself. They like to use their existing vendor base, they can do so. Lakewood does something similar where they have the department can do up to 25,000 documented quote, and the purchasing department does the 25 to 50. Most cities, the purchasing department does the documented quote for you. But we are so decentralized here that we're working very closely with Mr. Sullivan's department and Ron and all of these leadership team. That what we've said is you go ahead and if you want to get your documented quote yourself, go ahead, but purchasing gets to review it just to look for safety reasons. What we're trying to do, because I came from the judicial as well as I hired a buyer in from one of my best buyer from judicial. We're trying to build your confidence in your purchasing department. You guys have never turned, according to our data, not turned any of these back. We don't want you to have to be the people who are responsible if something goes wrong. We are responsible for catching it so that you have the confidence that your purchasing staff and Brian Archer are taking care of these things for you. Of course, you should still see things that weren't previously budgeted. But that piece where the purchasing staff hits the button on the approval on the Oracle Finance PO, that's where we've looked at it and said, yes, these are 3 valid but documented quotes.
So
That's
there is
why
still a requirement for 3 bids?
Yes, well, that's why we're calling it a documented quote instead of
Okay.
an informal. It isn't just oh, I have these 3 bids and I put them in a file. It's attached to your POs, comes to purchasing. We hit a button, and we are responsible for hitting that button in a very timely manner. Our intention is not to slow the departments up. Our
So-
intention is to push them forward.
So as an example, ice melt, the stuff that they're buying, because we seem to get that a couple of times a year for approval, and I've always thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
So that's what you're trying to eliminate through this process is the streets division, they're going to go through their normal process, they're going to get 3 documented quotes to purchase ice melt. It's going to come to the purchasing department, you're going to then review those and then say, we like number 3 of the 3, or are you?
No. Slicer is actually something that is on a formal quote, but let's use that example. You come into us with a commodity that is below the 50,000, purchasing.
Paper clips.
Sorry?
Paper clips.
Okay. We do review those 3 quotes. They've made their recommendation of the one they want. In fact, we're not even going to say that it has to be low bid every time. What we are requiring is that they do an analysis, a paragraph analysis of why it's the best value. And since I've been here, I have written a few sole sources for Mr. Devon to sign. And we've always made sure that it's always the best value, and there's real reasons why it's the best value. Not just that's our favorite guy, Johnny.
Right. And I guess that's the thing that I would be most worried of is that, we've got a great friend relationship where, that friend keeps getting, that particular buy every single time. So as long as we're not creating situations of favoritism.
Right.
Then-
We're trying to get several controls put into place that allow us to just take a look at things before they go on. And another one is the posting on BidNet. We want to make sure that we put out a quality product that represents the city of Arvada in a positive light. So we want to make sure our documents are in order, and that's all things that are just very important to people when you're in finance and purchasing.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
I just have actually a simple question. So I'm assuming our whole time frame and everything stays intact. So if it's a $50,000 contract, but it's a 5-year agreement, it will still come back to us to look at that for the length of time, right? We still see those.
No.
You didn't mention that, though.
No, that is the letter that we talked about
The weekly?
coming up to you on a Friday.
Yeah, but
So-
I thought there's an ordinance or there's an agreement that if there's anything over 60 month in an agreement, regardless of dollar amount, it still should come back to city council because
Anything
you're
greater
signing
than
along.
5 years is what you're asking about.
Exactly.
Yeah, with the annual renewals, yes.
Okay, those will still come see
We'll
us.
still work with that. We'll work with our legal department on that and come to you with the recommendations.
Okay.
What city council's comfortable with.
Irregardless of the
That is
the dollar
correct. As
amount.
it sits today, you're 100% correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure we were
Yeah.
clear. It didn't say anything in your
No,
documents.
and we haven't got to that point. We wanted to take your temperature to see if we were even in the ballpark on something like this.
Okay, thank you.
Our next steps would be, assuming city council would be okay with this, is we would bring this to you in the form of an ordinance change, probably in January. Could take longer than that, but sometime at the beginning of the year, and look to try to get that approved.
Mr. Marriott?
Question, Mr. Archer. Back in 2011, when the current process was kind of put in place, did you guys go back and look and see or try to determine why it's ended up the way it is or why it got put in place like it is now?
At the time, the finance director wanted to change how purchasing was being handled and wanted the purchasing department to be more advisory and audit and less hands-on. And so the thought at that period of time was to move towards a decentralized environment. Also, another reason why the limits were lowered. Being a decentralized environment is more difficult. And at the time, it was a great idea and it worked. And I think our departments have moved away from that now and feel like we'd really like to go back to, I'm not going to use a centralized environment, more of a high service.
Yeah, okay. And to your knowledge, have there been any purchasing problems coming up? I know you mentioned that you went back and looked at the council actions, and since then the council hasn't turned down any of the purchasing requests that have come to us in the form of resolutions, but it seems like part of those limits are safety or protection of the city's assets. Has there been any issues in that time frame where those lower limits were protective of the city?
There has been no protests. As far as problems or issues, internally, certainly many frustrations. Externally, inconsistent or incomplete solicitations requiring us to either extend our time period or update them. I cannot, off the top of my head, think of a time period that the lower limits protected the city. I am certain that there were plenty of periods of time like that, but I can't think of one today.
Right. Okay. I think that's all the questions I have. I'd make a comment because I think you're looking for some direction tonight,
yes,
Mr. Devon or Mr. Archer, and that's. I think this is a good idea. I think the releasing the process, streamlining the process to make those purchasing decisions and actions happen quicker is actually a big money saver in and of itself. As well as I think it probably on the other side, the vendor side allows them to act probably a little bit more efficiently as well, which I think in a competitive environment can lead to better pricing on some of the stuff the city buys. And so I think what you proposed here to me looks like a reasonable balance between you know, a informal, formal, and really formal process, if you want to call it that way, and still provide protection of, you know, the city's assets and the taxpayers essentially. And so my recommendation would be to bring this forward to us. I would personally be for it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGough.
Yes, I had the opportunity, of course, to review the documents over the past week. And listening to your presentation, I'm fully supportive of all the recommendations that you brought forward. And I look forward to having this presented to us as an ordinance for further consideration. So thank you very much for all the work that's gone into this.
I want to piggyback on Mr. Marriott's comments a little bit. I've got to think that for some vendors, the slow process had to be a deterrent to them either bidding or low bidding. You know, that they're thinking, well, we're not going to get a decision out, and I've got plenty of other people out there I can sell this commodity to and have a decision much sooner, and so I'm going to give them a better price. Yeah. Has that been your experience?
Absolutely. The mobilization for the vendors has been a real negative for working with the city of Arvada. Part of my job also is to be vendor outreach. We have got to have business owners feel like we care what they're doing and their side of the story and the mobilization and implementation side. So vendor outreach is part of our job.
Okay. And, you know, this information that you're going to pass on to council in terms of the approvals, are we also going to share that on our website? Or, I know that you can go on our website and see every line item purchase that we make, and I just want to make sure that's going to be consistent with what we're doing here, too.
Yes, it will be.
Very good. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Everybody comfortable with bringing this forward? I'm seeing everybody shake their head positively. Mr. Devon, bring it forward. Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Devon, next we're going to talk about the annual comprehensive plan implementation update.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Loretta Daniels, senior planner, will present this item.
Well, we're just waiting for that. We're going to do something a little different from last year. Well, actually, it was in January of 2017 that you last saw me with an update for the comp plan, and that was the update, the implementation update for 2016. This year, I have my colleagues here from all the departments, plus Aida and Aura, and we're going to showcase some of the projects that we're really very proud of that were either underway or completed in 2017. So the document that you have in your packet is mostly a matrix. And I think this is the format we'll keep going forward as we keep doing these implementation updates. So it's a quick way to kind of summarize both all the policies in the comprehensive plan plus all the action programs and projects the city is doing. So just a quick recap here. The comprehensive plan, of course, is our overarching document. It really provides guidance for the growth of the city, and it has a number of policies. The document, the current document, was approved in October of 2014. The first comprehensive plan that the city did was in 1964, and our current version is the 7th version of the plan. So within about the last 10 years, or a little longer, there have been some amendments to the comprehensive plan. The most recent one was the Bicycle Master Plan. So these plans are adopted, and they're adopted as part of the comprehensive plan. The Imagine Arvada Parks, Trail, and Open Space Master Plan was approved in 2016, and the Arvada Transit Station Framework Plan was approved in 2007. So with the approval of the comp plan in 2014, you saw an implementation strategy in December of 2015 that really identified high priority projects, and we've kept those projects in the back of this report as really an appendix to kind of keep track of these, keep them top of mind. They're also referenced in the matrix in a red color, so to keep that those are the high priority projects right from the first sort of blush of really implementing the comprehensive plan. So I mentioned we did the 2016 update earlier this year. Tonight we're here with the 2017 update, and our goal is to be back here a year from now in December of 2018 with the 2018 update. So this is one way to really keep the comp plan relevant and top of mind. So there are 3 primary chapters in the comprehensive plan. The Growth and Economic Development chapter has 42 policies and 60 implementation actions. The Multimodal Transportation Plan has 32 policies and 36 implementation actions. And the Vibrant Community and Neighborhoods chapter has 79 policies and 88 implementation actions. Here is the matrix. And just wanted to point out that the little graphics on the right-hand side are your at a glance look to really take a look at the progress of the actual projects. And here's the legend to really indicate how these projects are underway or nearing completion. Taking a look at each of these chapters, it's really important to sort of segment what are ongoing programs versus what are actual projects that have a definite timeline and completion. So in the Growth and Economic Development chapter, we have 31 ongoing actions, 3 projects that have not yet been initiated, 24 projects and programs which are in various stages of progress, and 2 projects which have been completed. In the Multimodal Transportation chapter, there are 24 ongoing programs. You can see that this is the majority of the programs. 2 projects, not yet initiated, 5 in progress, and 5 have been completed. And then in the Vibrant Community and Neighborhoods chapter, there are 54 ongoing programs, 28 in progress, and 6 actions have been completed. So I'm going to turn this over to my colleagues here, and as they come up, they'll introduce themselves and their departments.
Thanks, Loretta. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that AIDA has been working on to help with the implementation of this plan. 2 of the projects that I wanted to highlight tonight was the Arvada Marketplace. You're all aware of the redevelopment of the marketplace. A goal within the comp plan is to look at underutilized shopping centers and to have a focus on them to see if we can reinvigorate them. And an example of this is the Arvada Marketplace. This is one highlight that we have been working on. However, there are certainly many other shopping centers around the city that need a facelift. And so we continually work with our retail partner, KD Press, and talk to the various shopping center owners to see what we can do to help influence and reinvigorate some of these centers. Another highlight that we wanted to talk about is Sprouts. Another goal of the implementation of the comp plan is bringing in a diverse group of retailers to areas that are underserved. And although there are other grocery stores in this area, this provides a specific niche market that residents in that area were asking for, and we were able to help support and bring them here. So those are two projects that we wanted to highlight in working in the comp plan. Maureen Fair is going to come up and talk about some things she's working on.
Can I ask a quick question?
Oh,
Yes.
sure.
And I know that you're only highlighting two things, but from a primary job perspective,
Sure.
how many primary jobs, is there a highlight number that you could provide on those types of jobs in the city?
Sure. So, great question. Primary jobs are jobs that we define as bringing new wealth into the economy, and so they provide a good or service. That good or service is exported out of the community, and therefore bringing new wealth in. City Council, as you know, has a strategic result that we would like to try to create more than 800 new jobs in specific targeted industries identified by City Council, also known as primary jobs, by the year 2019. We are on track with that strategic goal, and in fact are very proud to announce that the Colorado Home Nursing Association is bringing 100 new jobs to the city of Arvada. At this time, they're getting their TCO as we speak, and so those 100 new jobs will be brought to Arvada, and that includes an additional 350 jobs that won't be necessarily located here, but will be bringing businesses, or employees to the location as a home base. But we have other companies that we're working with, like the expansion of Wanco and Prescient, to name a few. And so that is a constant top of mind thing that also goes to the implementation of the comp plan.
Thank you very much.
Another great example of that is SAS.
SAS,
Yes.
which is a great company that moved over into East Arvada.
Arvada.
Yep.
Right, which is space accessories. What's
Special Aerospace Systems.
Systems, right.
Yeah.
You
And
have to have
they're,
special clearance, though.
a
You have to have
manufacturer
special
of
clearance.
aerospace equipment, have stuff on satellites and all sorts of things going into space. So really neat company.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good question. Okay. Ms. Fair?
Good evening, Council. I'm Maureen Fair, and I'm here to talk about ORA and what we are contributing to the comp plan. So we have a couple goals that we've been working on, and the first one is the one that says encourage development of transit supportive, higher density, mixed use pedestrian oriented areas. So in Arvada, we have 3 transit stops, and so we've been working for the past several years on building density around these stops. And you can see here are some examples: the Solana Old Town Station and Park Place Old Town, the Hilton Garden Inn. That next slide is a proposed one. You guys will be getting this next month. It is the Old Town Residence. Also at the Kipling Station, we have some density going in. Arvada Station came in several years ago, and right now, if you go by, you'll see that it's well under construction, is the gateway at Arvada Ridge, which is just north of Ridge Road. Another goal that we are working on is designate and promote redevelopment and infill to generate economic revitalization, improve physical conditions, and provide an appropriate mix of quality housing choices. So here's a before and after, the Arvada Plaza, which has now been redeveloped into the Super Walmart. This is that same project. This is, I wanted to highlight here, improving the physical conditions. That's that same hill, one looking down the hill and one looking up the hill. This is across the street, the Rawson Creek project. If you guys didn't buy, it is really coming together. The contractors turned it over to the tenants, and they are well on their way to doing the tenant improvements. And with that,
good evening, counselors. I think I'm the shortest one in the room, so I have to bring this down a bit. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Carice Canales, and I'm the new Neighborhood Engagement Coordinator. I've been here about 3 months, so very excited to meet you all. On behalf of the City Manager's Office, I'll be presenting a few highlights. The first one being about the Arts and Culture Master Plan. That was established in April of 2016, and in October, they contracted with 23.4 degrees to complete their cultural master plan. And on the screen, you can see the picture. They just did an arts tour of West 40, which was a cultural district in the city of Lakewood. So very exciting things. As far as what I've been doing in neighborhood engagement, we're really working to engage new residents and leaders all across Arvada. So about 3 weeks ago, we held a neighborhood leader brainstorm session. So we had 20 residents from across the city in the room talking to us about their big dreams for their neighborhoods and for the city. And since that meeting, we have connected with an additional 18 leaders. So there's some really great energies around neighborhood engagement building. Another project that we're working on, we're currently in our session of City Hall 101, where it averages about 20 to 25 residents come and learn about what the city does and how they can get more involved. One of the common themes that we're hearing is people want to get more involved in their communities, they just don't know how. So this is a great opportunity for us to show them what they can do. And through this program, we've already had some of the participants volunteer through our Snow Buddies snow shoveling program, and also with the Severe Weather Shelter Network. So we're very excited for what's been happening in 2017 and look forward to 2018. Any questions for me? Okay, I'll pass it off to Brian.
So with any good comp plan, part of the most important thing, or at least I think is the most important thing, is going to be how you're going to finance and pay for that. So
we would hope that would be the way you think.
That's what you pay me for.
Not to wear those ties. Go ahead.
One of the items we'll be looking at is updating our capital improvement plan. As council is well aware, we had a citizen CIP committee help us put together a plan, help us put together our most recent 10-year plan, and it is time to update that. There are many different items that have come up since then, including items like Myers Pool and transportation needs that did not exist back in 2014 and 15. So we do need to take a look at all of the projects that are currently in the plan, figure out how we can fund them, and one of the big wild cards is related to whether or not we're going to go back to the citizens for reauthorization related to our debt. As council might remember, our sales and use tax bonds pay off at the end of 2018. And so if we are going to run a process, we need to get moving on whether or not we're going to do that. The other item relates to current and future financing tools. The City of Arvada, in conjunction with the Urban Renewal, has used incentives and different types of items to bring businesses to Arvada. Economic development with Ryan and his team is out there every day trying to attract businesses. And so we do need to revisit what is available and what can be used in the future. I do know City Council has talked extensively about what would qualify for an incentive and has come up with some very good criteria that different developers need to meet before even being considered. And so we will continue to look at that and update those. I'll now turn it over to Mike Lee.
Good evening,
Lee.
Mayor, members of City Council. I'm Mike Lee. I'm the manager of Park and Urban Design. And we'll talk about a few of our projects that we completed this year and one in the planning phase. That big pump on the left side, that's the new pump we installed at Stinger. And if you look to the right there, that's a trench that went in about a month before that picture was taken. So a lot of times we want people to notice our projects, but this one kind of went unnoticed, and the soccer season completed, and we replaced 60 acres of irrigation and a new pump. So we're going to rebuild a new pump over on Lutz. We're going to start on that one fairly soon too, and use the same technology. But this saves a lot of energy. We can water at least 1/2 faster than we did before, quicker than we did before. And the advantages are we could water the whole 60 acres at night, where we couldn't even come close to that before. So that saves a lot of energy. Those turbines are the two things on the front. A computer turns them on and off and saves energy, so it relates to the demand of the system. So we save electrical energy, and we're going to save a tremendous amount of water too, and time. Okay, so, and like I said, that trench was about a month before that picture was taken. And our contractor and our park maintenance guys just worked together great. Edge Soccer worked together with us. And so they seeded and compacted those trenches as they went. So we were able to get that whole season in. The playground on the left, we renovated the playground at Stinger also. That's a part of our Take Lasting Care program, where we're always going in and we rely on park maintenance to give us priorities in terms of projects that need to be replaced. So we replaced that playground, and then to the right there you see the trail overlook that's along the Van Bibber Creek Trail just west of the new Kipling underpass. So again, that relates to our priorities related to trail improvements. The playground to the left relates to, we usually replace 2 or 3 playgrounds every year so we can stay on top of this and keep these playgrounds safe and current. This fourth project actually is in the planning stages. This is a holistic health park, and it's a cooperative effort with Red Rocks Community College, Apex Park and Rec District, and the city. And this is just north of the Ridge project and right next to Red Rocks College. So, and it relates to one of our master plan goals was to get a park within a half mile of all of our residents, neighborhood or community park. And so this helps fulfill that goal too, another one of our new parks. So we're excited about that one. Like I said, it's still in the planning stages. We've had 3 community meetings, and what you see there is the preferred alternative that the people selected. So those are a few of our projects, some that we've completed and some that we're working on. So any questions?
I have a comment.
Mr. Fiber.
Yeah, I have a comment. I don't know who's been at the Stinger playground, but I just want to say, for those that haven't, using technology to play the game to keep kids active is a thumbs up, because every time I walk back there, there's always somebody playing that game. And for those that don't know it, there's touch LED screens that are distance apart from each other that makes the kid become active by running from one end to the other or chasing the lights or whatever, and plays music. It's in full surround sound. It is the coolest thing I've ever seen. But every time since I live that way, I walk by there, there's always kids playing it, young and old.
We've had some complaints, Mr. Pfeiffer, that you've been kicking kids off so that you could play.
Hey, I put my quarter on the machine every time. I'm next. So I don't think you highlighted that, and I think that's something that is innovative and it's noteworthy. And good work on that.
Great. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, members of council, I'm John Ferruzzi. I'm a transportation planning engineer with Arvada Public Works. The Public Works section of the comprehensive plan is primarily focused on transportation. It's the multimodal transportation section of the comprehensive plan.
Hey, John, where'd you get those pictures? Are you sure those are Arvada? I don't see very many cars
Changed
on
quite
there.
a bit. So there are 5 transportation goals in the chapter, and there are policies that emphasize a balanced transportation plan and system. And its purpose is to really support the quality of life and sustainability and the efficient movement of people and goods. In the slide here, you'll notice that Indiana Street is kind of an example of a lot of changes that are going on, and it's a result of growth. The 2-lane roadway shown there is a roadway that lacks turn lanes and the traffic signal and bicycle lanes, sidewalks, and other things in the past, and now it's being incrementally added to the roadway as growth is occurring. And that's part of the multimodal evolution of some roadways that are in Arvada. Similarly, there are, the city's also applied the multimodal concept to existing roadways. And there are policies that retrofit some of the existing roadways in Arvada. And these are especially along streets that connect to the G-Line transit stations. In this case, Old Wadsworth is shown here, where there's a retrofit project that provides a bicycle lane as well as wider sidewalks. And in conjunction with transit, this is considered a first and last mile connection to transit, which is the crux of a multimodal transportation system. The multimodal policies also extend to coordination with regional transportation efforts in supporting transit. This is an example here of the transit hub where G-Line and Fast Track improvements through RTD have also kind of triggered the city for its support of those investments. And the city has worked with RTD to consolidate commuter parking with Old Town parking, with essentially with RTD buses in a transit hub adjacent to the Old Town G-Line station. And so the location for this is strategic in that it allows for short walks, and there are elevators to help with to support the needs, the mobility needs of those who are with individuals with disabilities. And it's also worth noting that Public Works is also implementing multimodal goals in neighborhoods within established neighborhoods to address neighborhood safety and traffic mitigation. The image here is from Independence Street, and through a recent resurfacing project, there were bikeways added to Independence Street. And at the intersection of Independence and Grandview Avenue, there was a raised island added to the intersection along with crosswalks and a push-button signal to allow for neighborhood residents to be able to cross the street more safely and easily. These kinds of improvements are ongoing kind of spot treatments that are happening across the city in different areas. And along with this progress, also, there are many policies that are a little bit larger in scale, and we're paying attention to those as well. It's worth mentioning that I'm working with the Citizens Transportation Committee to evaluate those policies, and together we're identifying ways to implement multimodal solutions. The committee, through their council liaison, Councilman Pfeiffer, will be sharing the committee's thoughts on a budget-based strategic transportation plan for council to consider. Any questions for me?
Don't see any.
Okay.
All right. We are getting close to the end. Jim Sullivan. They only gave me 4 slides for some reason, but here we go. So the goal here is conserve water resources. We are partnered with the Center for Resource Conservation. We'll once again be offering 300 gardens in a box. Those are planting systems that allow people to take turf out and put plants in, low water using plants in. We'll give 3 landscaping seminars again this year. Very well attended last year. I think we had over 450 people attend those. And then we'll do 200 landscaping consultations where a landscaper will come out to individual's house and help them develop a plan to reduce their turf and put in, again, low water landscaping. We'll also be going out to the Rawson water treatment plant. You can see some landscape removal we had to do. The existing landscaping had gotten so overgrown it would actually become a safety concern, security concern. We removed it, so we're working with CU Denver in the Hometown Initiative to have a planting class come in and give us a new planting plan that would be fairly low water using plants that would enhance the plant view. The next one here is to ensure an adequate supply of water. We'd already talked about the Gross Reservoir project. We are financial participants in that project, and the funds for it are in the 10-year financial plan. So it's moving forward, and we intend to participate and acquire additional water supplies that way. The next one is, the goal is to improve air quality. This one is encourage the use of low pollution vehicles. We do that with the alternative fuels. Biodiesel and E85 fuels, both when burned in a vehicle, produce less emissions than standard fuels. And our goal here is to get to a fleet that has about 60% of them are these alternative fuels. The last one's really not mine, it's police, but we didn't want to bring them out for just one slide. The goal here is to provide police services and facilities to meet the needs of the Arvada residents. And this is the future community station called Delta, which is planned for Northwest Arvada. It'll be at Indiana and 90th. It's in the development review and design now. We plan to have that under construction starting in spring of 2018 and staffed by 2019. And on to community development.
This is close to the end, so I'm bringing up sort of the rear a bit on this one. So I'm Ed Talbot. I serve you and the public as your manager for Housing Preservation Resources and as director for the Arvada Housing Authority. And I wanted to bring one project to you in this report, and this had to do with the renovation of Marcella Manor. This relates to a variety of policies that are included in the comprehensive plan related to housing diversity, affordable housing, and trying to maintain our affordable housing stock. So some of the council members may remember Marcella Manor is about 65th and Wadsworth. It's 204 units of housing for very low income seniors subsidized through the Section 8 program. It was developed in 1977, so it was showing its age. It came up for sale. Our concern was 2 things. Number 1, retain this as affordable housing for seniors in the community, and number 2, hopefully provide for renovations that this particular building needed. Fortunately, we worked with Security Properties out of Seattle. They were interested and did proceed to purchase the property. Total cost for the project came to about $22 million, of which $10 million was for renovations on the property. And so you'll see, at least in 2 of the slides, some of the renovations that occurred. Our participation was fairly modest. What we brought to it was a cooperative attitude, and also we brought to them $5.6 million of private activity bonding authority, tax-exempt bonding authority. We arranged to provide that bonding authority to the Colorado Housing Finance Authority, given the large bite this project took out of that bonding authority they had. So we did provide that out of our 2016 allocation. So what you can see here is the exterior of the building. One of the improvements was to completely redo the siding of the building and provide for new, more energy efficient windows. And you can see the change in what is a rather obviously plain building. This is in one of the one of the kitchens. You can see a before and after of the work that was done to improve the kitchens. Now, this is just a couple of things. There were a number of improvements that were done to the property related to safety, health, the utility of the building, and then I think the quality of the living environment for the folks that are there.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Miller's got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. I know that you and I have a scheduled meeting on Friday or Thursday, but I do have a question that just can't wait because I'm so excited. Sorry.
Well, I wouldn't want to keep you there
waiting. I was reading this report that I love so much. Your graphs and numbers are fantastic. And on page 6, it says that we have identified potential sites for attainable housing as part of the Hometown Colorado initiative. And so I called Mr. Devon and inquired about these potential sites and how many are there and what are we doing and what's the next steps and when can this be done. And he informed me that this isn't as simple as let's get it done next week and find a developer. But I would love that as these sites come available that are designated for, or they're not designated for, but they are identified as potential sites for affordable housing, that we are intentional about finding an affordable housing developer for these sites.
And excuse me, hear you loud and clear. And obviously, this is one of the tools we're looking to do with the Hometown Initiative with the class that's working on this. And indeed, we're going to have a presentation from the class on their almost final product Wednesday. So I'll be attending that presentation to hear about the results. They were basically focusing in on about 34 sites. I think we just need to be clear, we're not designating the sites. We're just identifying the potential for vacant land parcels that might be there. But pulling on two things, one of your strategic results the council did establish was to try to provide for the construction and development of at least 50 units of affordable senior housing. And we actually have I've been working with two entities where we do have potential to possibly see one of those, one or two, maybe come out of that. So we're proceeding, trying to fulfill some accomplishments for that strategic result.
Thank you.
Very good. Ms. Ford.
Ed, I just wanted to say that when I had the opportunity to tour Marcella Apartments, I really, really enjoyed what I saw. And even more importantly, I talked to the residents, a number of them, where I was sitting at the table, and I asked them, how do you enjoy, do you enjoy living here? How do you like this place? And they all really enjoyed the apartment complex, which the ones that I was sitting next to, I thought that was really good. They seemed very enthused about it. So I commend you, and I commend the builder, because the other thing that I love about the apartment complex is that the builder put in a solar roof, and there was a perfect example where for them, it's saving them money, and that's why they did it. It wasn't just to put in to be a good guy. It was really for economic benefits. So
right.
I thought it was a great project.
And I'm really pleased because we retain those basic 200 plus units as Section 8, so that's for very low income seniors. And that's sometimes that's a little bit difficult when you get to projects that low affordability level. So.
And I thought it was very nice quality.
Yes, and especially, I shouldn't take too much time, but the fact that they didn't have doors before where they could access, you actually had to push your way in, even if you had a walker or something, that was difficult for them. And to have doors that they could push the button and automatically open.
Yeah.
Really assists with the accessibility.
There was a lot of thought that went into it, and I really think we have to commend the developer for that.
I agree.
Right.
Okay. And another project from community development is the Land Development Code update. The Land Development Code is actually probably the main tool that implements the comprehensive plan. There's actually about 60 policies that are in some way touched by the Land Development Code. So we started this project in the summer. It's a 2-year project, and we'll complete this in 2019. So success for the comprehensive plan. As you can see, we don't really want to have the comprehensive plan as a document that's on a shelf that we just reach to periodically. We want to use this comprehensive plan daily, and we do use it daily in development review. We also will use it for the capital improvements programs. And one thing that came out of the update in January, is that we set up an oversight committee, which is composed of the people you saw here tonight. We met twice over the year, and we'll do that again for next year as well, too. And as for these annual updates, not all cities do this. This is one way in which we really want to make this document a living document, to keep on top of it, to address trends, and to make any proactive changes. So for the next steps, we want to coordinate with Council with the strategic results that you'll come up with for next year. We will have the Oversight Committee meet, and we'll do another document. But one thing that we will do is we'd like to propose some proactive amendments to the comprehensive plan, and we'd like to bring those forward to Council by about the middle of next year. And then the next update would be in December of 2018. So any questions?
Ms. Ford.
Loretta, I have a couple of questions for clarification. On page 10, do you have the document that we have?
Yes, but I don't have my glasses.
That's a must. On L-3.2, it said that mixed-use areas should be located in urban centers or designated corridors and should create or demonstrate specific characteristics. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on what are we talking about when we're talking about those specific characteristics?
Well, that's really the language from the comprehensive plan. And that's something that through the Land Development Code we're going to address, because I think we'll have to take a look at developing a mixed-use district, for instance, some of these major corridors on arterial streets, for instance. And I think these things in terms of specific characteristics will address height, density, compatibility with adjacent uses, especially if they're adjacent residential uses.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. On page 12, under the ED-4.2, what I'm really questioning is the last bullet on page 12 and then into 13. So it said, continue the implementation of the TOD framework plan by increasing employment in Old Town area. Encourage developers to provide office uses in Old Town. And then that bullet with the next bullet, to me, I needed some clarification. So the next one, develop strategy to promote balanced mix of retail uses that continue to contribute to the character and vibrancy of Old Town. So in the first bullet, we say that we want to encourage developers to provide office uses. And then in the second bullet, we're saying that we want to promote a balanced mix of retail uses. So my question is, how do they work together, those two bullets?
Well, from the office uses, there is a challenge to attract and even retain, as we've heard from property owners and developers, to attract and retain office uses in Old Town. And one of the issues that has come up in discussions is parking, and really how to address parking for office uses. So that's one thing that is always an issue that kind of rises to the top. We addressed it in a way in our Old Town Vibrancy Study, which was presented to you in September. So having employment in Old Town is really essential in order to have that daytime traffic, and have additional vibrancy. So it is a challenge to do that. For the balanced mix of retail uses, and again, it still has to do more with vibrancy as well, too. We had recognized there was that changeover from retail to office uses, and to really continue that initial work that we did in the Old Town Vibrancy Study to really take a look at how we can make sure we can retain and build on the retail. And looking at maybe does that require diversity, or do we embrace the way that Old Town is going is much more of an experiential and restaurant and entertainment place.
Okay. And then the final question that I have has to do with page 26, the N 4.3, high-density special needs housing near services and transit. Encourage higher density special needs and senior housing projects to locate close to community facilities such as shopping, medical facilities, or transit centers. And under ORA, it says to consider the adoption of senior and special needs housing incentives and policies for new and infill development. And my question is, are we currently engaged in doing this?
Ms. Farah, do you want to respond to that?
We are actively looking for affordable senior and affordable housing. That is something that's really important to we staff people. I do have to say, though, that that has not been a commitment of City Council until the last time you guys went through and did your goals. Before, it wasn't something that was given to ORA to do. So I do hear now, though, that there is a new desire and a new goal that we would be very happy to go out and implement.
I would say staff was beating that drum for some time, and it's finally being heard, I think, by City Council and by I think the board was the Urban Renewal Board was probably more receptive than City Council.
Well, I think that as we look at our demographics, I think that we're going to see that it's going to become an imperative, especially with the aging population and the fact that the greatest percentage of that aging population are women. And they are the population, as Ed has mentioned, that tends to be lower income.
Okay, does that complete the presentation? Mr. Devon, is there anything you need from us, or was this more informational and for us to get some questions on?
Primarily informational. Also, I want to emphasize what something Loretta said. In order for us to really operationalize the comprehensive plan, I think it's important for us to be accountable and to bring these updates to the City Council each year. And we hope it's informative for you, but frankly, the fact that we bring it to you guys every year makes it a really meaningful task for us. So that's one of the reasons why we think it's important to bring it to you.
Very good. Why don't we take a brief stand in place?
that.
Were you? Seriously? Oh, you guys were here tonight? Cool.
Okay, thanks for that brief break. We'll move on to our next item, the Fiber Master Plan Update. Mr. Devon?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're very proud to present this update to you, and we're going to start with Director of Information Technology Management, Ron Zarnicki.
I'd like to point out that this presentation also ties into the comp plan of the policy U 3.1 and 3.2, which are technology in the community and technology infrastructure to promote business development. So that's kind of our tie-in, is why we didn't go right when they were going. So I wanted to point out first, the significance of broadband for us. We have over 700 employees in the city that work at over 27 different locations throughout the city that all require some sort of network connectivity for them to operate efficiently. And then those employees manage a number of devices out in the city, be it traffic signals, school flashers, SCADA systems, and other things. And that's what's identified on that map. On the right, all the dots represent a particular type of technology that's managed by the city. And there's also the fire department and the schools on there are the red and then the flags. And the other part is the savings we'll see in the future. Right now we lease fiber from Comcast to connect 6 buildings that create a ring around the city. And that lease ends in 2019. And at that point, we have the option to renew for a year or 2, I believe. And then it goes to a managed service. And the bandwidth that we have to go through a managed service, I think we would be looking anywhere between a $50,000 and $60,000 a month price range to get 10 gigabit links to 6 different buildings throughout the city. So doing it ourselves and managing it, I think, will be cost effective in the future. And we're also working with the school district and the fire department for this plan that we've been working on. And there's some benefits to working with them from a public safety. The school district, for the students having high speed in the schools. If you have kids in schools, you know that they use technology heavily for their work. And then just for the future, being prepared for smart city or connected city opportunities. That might be related to traffic management, adaptive signals, driverless vehicles that might be coming, in the Internet of Things, which would have sensors that might communicate back with all of those things. So that's why this is an important project to continue on with. And this ties into the council strategic result, which started a few years ago. And if you recall, we did a citizen survey, and what came out of that was the importance of reliability, then speed, and then cost was the order that the citizens responded in. And then we voted out of SB 152, or the citizens did. And we're not looking at this to provide broadband to the citizens. We're looking at it as broadband for city operations at this point and smart city type opportunities. And that's where we came up with the map that's on the right with the lines. And you'll see that would be the infrastructure pathways that we would put fiber in that would allow us to connect to all those facilities that are on there. And what's helping with this is the administrative rule that was adopted earlier this year. And just having this plan is giving us direction. So Rick now is going to talk about where we've been and where we're going, and he's helping definitely build with the construction of this project.
All right, thank you, Ron. Good evening, council. Before I jump into our progress report, I want you to kind of look at the yellow lines. That's kind of our master plan, what we've been working off of. I'm going to talk about how we're going to get there or how far we are right now. But before I do, I want to I put a couple samples on your dais there for you to look at. This is what I'm going to be talking about is the 2-inch conduit that we've been putting in the ground. You've probably seen a lot of this on back of trucks, on metal spools have been sitting around in the city for the last year because of the industry in upgrading their plant or their infrastructure in the city. So this is the 2-inch conduit. And then the black tubing is, if you look inside, they got inner ducts in there. There's 12 different colored inner ducts, and inside each one of those inner ducts is the fiber. And there's 12 strands of fiber in each one of those inner ducts. So what you're holding in your hand is about 144 strands of fiber. That's the way we are going to be getting our internet in the future, and if not already.
Rick?
So, yes?
What are the different colors? What do they represent?
That's more for just mapping purposes.
Oh, okay.
So if you think about 144 strands of fiber and where they're going and where they need to be going and how they're going to connect, it's all about color coding when it comes to mapping. And you'll see, yeah, the fibers, Mr. Pfeiffer's pointing out that the fibers are also color coded. So it's very, very delicate. So. All right,
so this explains why if somebody cuts one of these suckers, it's a real problem.
Exactly, and how time-consuming it is to splice it back together.
So dial 811, right?
Exactly.
Call before you do.
You can see how easy it is. It can be to take something down that's connected. So looking at the map up here, I want to talk about the last 16 years. The first 15 years from 2001 to 2016, which is what you see in blue, the city was able to get in about 11.6 miles of conduit and fiber. I'm going to talk about the upper right-hand corner, the blue part up there. The way the city was able to get that fiber and conduit in the ground was they were actually thinking and collaborating together with the streets and the public works and the engineers. And so when we built 72nd Avenue, the traffic engineers thought it'd be nice to have conduit and fiber along 72nd Avenue. When we widened Kipling Street from 72nd up to 80th Avenue, they put in conduit. So the stretch down 80th, we needed connectivity at the Lake Arbor Police Substation. We thought about going down Wadsworth, but as you heard in the earlier presentation from the Denver Water Board, working with CDOT can be difficult at times. And so we opted to work with our other departments in the city, and we connected some traffic signals along 80th and got us the loop back down and connectivity to the city. The stretch out west, what we call the 64th Way, is not only 64th Avenue, but 64th Parkway, and it connects to that green line. That green line is a leased line with, that leads us down to Jeffco, which allows our police to have access to the records and management system, the 911, and it also increased our speeds not only at our 2 water treatment plants, but also at the golf course. We went up Quaker Street and got the signal up there at 72nd and Quaker as well, and then tied into the Indiana shops. So you can kind of see what we did in the first 15 years. Now, I'm going to talk about 2017. What were we able to do when the 2 big industries walked into the city of Arvada and they wanted to start upgrading their infrastructure? We were able to use our ordinance that's been in place since 2001, the co-location ordinance, along with the administration rules which you approved back in March. And we were able to co-locate and put in another 11.5 miles of conduit, just conduit in the ground, and that's what you see in purple on that map. So the big question is, well, that's all great. We got a lot of missing links there, what we call missing gaps. And if you look at the next map, this is our plan for 2018 and 2019. What you see in there in the red is an RFP that we just finished up last week. We're in the process of scoring right now. We had 6 great applicants, and our goal is to get these missing gaps of about 12.5 miles filled in by the midsummer. And with that, we will be able to start pushing fiber through the conduit. And if you take a kind of a big approach look at this map, you can see 2 big loops that we've made, and that is strictly based on redundancy. That line that extends up, that green line that will extend up and goes down Highway 72 ties into 3 Creeks Middle School up there. So with that, and that's I believe a 20-year lease, Ron, is that correct? That the city has. So we have 2 huge redundant loops when we get this all complete. So our goal for 2019, or actually by the end of 2018 and then into 2019, is actually to start lighting some fiber. With our our partnerships with not only the fire department, but with the school district. Our main focus by the end of next year is to really light the 64th corridor on down to Rawson Road and back into City Hall. By doing that, we're gonna be able to connect about 3 to 4 city buildings, 6, I believe, schools, and about 3 or 4 fire districts buildings, and then we'll be able to continue on from there. So that kind of sums up our presentation. Ron, anything else? If there's any questions.
Mr. Marriott?
Quick question, Rick. So the co-located conduit that we got, the 11 or 12 miles of that, any idea, like per mile, roughly what that cost us to get that co-located conduit?
I was getting most of it put in for around $9 to $10 a foot.
Okay. And then, so the plans for 2018 and 2019, the place where we're talking about putting in the conduit and fiber, by comparison, similar cost, or is it?
With the RFP, like I said, we're going through the scoring process. I haven't looked at all of them, but I think Ron and I were hoping if we could get in the range of about $12 to $13 a foot, we'd be pretty happy and satisfied with. I mean, when we initially did the master plan for conduit and fiber, they were estimating $25 to $30 a foot. So we feel like we've gotten a pretty good deal so far in 2017 with the co-location.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. McGough?
Yes, in looking at the schematic for the plans for 2018-19, you mentioned 2 loops.
Yes.
I see one very complete one, almost complete. A second one that is a little less complete. There's those little gaps in there. What?
So the little gaps are this map is taken off of, as we do a co-locate, I put it into the mapping system, and then once we go out and map it, it gets turned on to an active layer. And we noticed this at 5 o'clock tonight. That little gap that you see along 58th Avenue is actually right in front of the new Walmart. And that actually has conduit in the ground because we connected Garrison, Holland, and Independence signals there. So that is a closed loop. So the 2 loops I'm talking about, Mr. McGough, is it comes down 64th Rawson Road to 58th, goes up Carr Street to 72nd, and then all the way out to Indiana Street, and then back into the Indiana shops. That's the first little loop I call.
And there's 2 little tiny gaps in that loop. Up there at the southeast corner of Stanley Lake.
Okay, Stanley Lake, that explanation, I'm working on, that's a tough one. We have a bridge up there at 86 Parkway. And we actually have a conduit that's going through that bridge. And I am working with both CenturyLink and Comcast to find out whose conduit that is. It's on city property. It was a project that was built, I think, in the late 80s or mid 80s. So I'm trying to figure out, instead of spending $20,000 to go underneath the canal with fiber and conduit, I'd rather go through the conduit that's along the bridge and partner with one of the 2 companies and save the city some money. So again, it's not active. I'm working on it, so that's why that gap's there.
Okay, but that gap will disappear soon.
Yes, I'm hoping.
Okay, thank you.
At a much cheaper rate.
Okay. And by the way, when you put this, if you should run that underneath the canal, it doesn't seem to bend. So what do you have to do to get that underneath a canal to go that depth? Does it start way back? And
I don't know if you've seen any of the boring machines that have been on the roadsides for the last year. It's an amazing technology, these boring machines. They can make runs from 500 to 800 feet. They'll actually put the bore all the way through, and then they'll pull the conduit back through. So like when we were doing a co-location with one of the companies, they were actually pulling 3 of those pipes, 2-inch conduit pipes, back through at the same time. 1 for us, 2 for them, and they put them in separate vaults. And we have our vaults that are security bolted and locked and labeled, and then the industry has theirs. So there is some flexibility. I know it doesn't feel like it with this short of a piece, but there's a lot more flexibility than you can imagine. And the neat thing about it, you haven't seen a lot of this laying around, and you have it sticking out of the ground. Any of this scrap stuff, they send back and they recycle everything.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Pfeiffer, do you know anything about this stuff?
I do. 20 years doing it. It gets me excited because I don't want to bore you guys. You don't want to listen to my stuff. These guys do. No, when we first started this adventure about broadband and trying to, well, not broadband, but fiber, I don't even think, what was that, probably, 3-4 years ago, maybe? My thought process at the time was, the lights need to be remotely controlled. We need bandwidth to the city buildings. We need to do our business smarter, not harder, and gain efficiencies. I'll tell you, in the last 2 weeks at my new job, I've completely realized how far advanced Colorado is, because this, exactly what we're doing, will be critical to the infrastructure of the state. I just, again, did not realize how advanced the state was in regards to autonomous vehicles, connected devices, smart cities, and it's not just a proof of concept scale, it's at macro deployment. It is statewide is what they're trying to do. And the interesting part is they're trying to do it in 3 to 5 years, where they're looking at all sorts of technology. But for it to really, really work, the cities and counties have to get in alignment to allow that system to work. And so I'm excited to see that, we're thinking for our community and our citizens, because when that day comes, we can leverage this same infrastructure to hopefully improve our commute and our transportation system at a level. If you asked me a year ago, I probably was not even really thinking about it at that level, and today it's completely mind-blowing for me. So I'm glad we're ahead of that curve compared to a lot of other communities.
Yep.
So,
I
and saving
might
the
add,
money.
what we're doing here and working with the school district, it's amazing how excited they are to just work with us and how active we are being on this whole bit, because they're taking what we're doing, they're working with us, and they're already starting talks with Wheat Ridge and Lakewood to try and do the same thing, because they ultimately want to connect every one of the schools in the school district. So that's pretty exciting to kind of be one of the leaders in the county, especially with the school district.
And hopefully this whole fiber CDOT thing will not be a problem in the near future.
Exactly.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Mr. Devon if we could put this topic on the R1 School District Committee agenda, as well as the Fire Protection District agenda. And then, how do I plug this in at my house? Is it going to work?
It's going to take a little bit more than that. A couple questions, a couple of legitimate questions. First of all, is there going to be any kind of cost sharing with the school district or the fire district in terms of actually lighting these things up?
Yeah, right now the fire district has already contributed about $85,000, which we've put into the project fund to help fund this for next year, and we're working on an MOU for $100,000 for next year for the school district to do the work down 64th Avenue.
Great. And then with this conduit, the conduit's obviously much larger than the little piece that's going to go into it that has the, so is there an opportunity for sharing or renting out the additional space, or?
I think both. There's extra capacity in the conduit, and then we'll actually have extra fiber capacity on what we put in there. And if you go back to the master plan, you'll see that could actually be considered a middle mile network for maybe other private industries to connect to, that then can connect to other networks that are outside the city, similar to what Bob was talking about. So we'd have a tremendous amount of capacity to create public-private partnerships.
Okay. And I think we should be very clear, we're not trying to replace the private sector in terms of what they're doing. We're taking care of our needs and working with the other public sector entities on this.
That's correct.
Very good. Okay, I see no other questions. Thanks for the visual aids, especially for me. I need to, and we'll explain to Mr. Jones that it's not going to be quite as simple as just plugging this in.
Thank you.
And that's not, no. Very good. Mr. Devon, next one.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're going to have Loretta back up again to discuss demographic and transportation data and trends.
Very good. Loretta?
Well, good evening. Just as this is getting ready, the actual presentation is going to highlight just some of the changes over time. So comparing what's in the document right now, which is sort of the most recent data, the American Community Survey data for primarily from 2011 to 2015 with the previous years. So you can sort of see the trends. So not only are we benchmarking, this presentation also outlines a little bit in terms of some changes for trends. Except, however, this is the report.
Yep, yep.
So I can just jump into some of the slides a little bit. Just with the data, this report is a little different from what you saw a year ago in that the income data comes from the one-year American Community Survey data. And that's a bit of a change. There's sort of more validity, less volatility in those numbers now, so I feel comfortable using the one-year American Community Survey data. So,
Mr. Archer, as a CSU graduate, has messed up the system. Oh, he fixed it. Very good.
okay. Okay, great. So we're just going to focus in on the categories of people, income and employment, housing, and then do a summary and then some next steps as well for this demographic report. So what we'd like to do is bring this demographic data to you annually so that you can track trends. And so it's really important for a city to kind of know where they're going, if there is anything outstanding that's to be flagged or that's important to address. So we're benchmarking with 8 peer cities. That's cities with over 100,000 population and comparing data over time. I also referenced this just a few seconds ago here with the data sources. Just also wanted to point out too that we do use, in addition to the Census Bureau and Bureau of Labor Statistics information, some DRCOG and RTD data for the transportation. So to start off with people. As of July 1st, 2016, the Census Bureau estimated our population at 117,453, making us the 7th largest city in Colorado and the 5th largest in the metro region. We have good reason to suspect that number is going up. So we will not get the July 1st, December 17 population estimates from the Census Bureau until the spring. So we'll be in suspense until then. So with the actual growth, we've seen a lot of growth, 15% between 2000 and 2015, 10.4% basically since 2010 to 2016. And between 2015 and 2016, there's been a 1.8% increase in population. So we are growing quickly, but there are other cities in the region that are growing faster. Thornton, for one, is a city that's growing faster than we are, as are some others. Denver as well, too. So this map shows the census block groups with the highest rate of growth, and which is the light red and the dark red areas, and that's in the northwest region of the city primarily. So just as a reminder about the growth in Arvada, in 1960, Arvada's population was just under 20,000. But the major periods of growth were really the 1960s and the 1970s. When combined, those 2 decades added 65,000 people to the city. You can see that in the 1980s was a period of very slow growth. 1990s had about 13,000. 2000s were very low. And as we look forward into the future, you can see that the projections, and these are based on the estimates for 2035 population that were developed through the comprehensive plan. So these are forecasts, really, of how the population can grow. Our build-out estimate is 154,000 people. So with our age, our median age is 40.9 years of age. And as you can see from the little chart on the right-hand side, it has been increasing from 37.2 in 2000 to 40.9 now. So we have the highest, one of the highest median ages, and also we have at 15.2% one of the highest proportions of seniors 65 years and older. So our population 65 years and older has been increasing. So last year in the 2010-2014 number, it was 14.6. It's now 15.2. So our seniors have been, that senior proportion of the population is really increasing. And that's shown a little more dramatically in this chart here, which shows that compared to Colorado and the United States, our proportion of seniors is increasing faster than those two entities. As for the gender distribution, 56% of the population 65 and older are females, and approximately 1/4 of all households have a senior resident. So as we look at some quick facts, for 38% of Arvada's population is 50 years and older, which is approximately 1 in 2.6 residents. 22% of the population is 60 years and older, 1 in 5 residents. 15.2% of Arvada's population is 65 years and older, 1 in 7, and then 6.6 is 75 years and older, or 1 in 14. So for the distribution of residents 65 years and older, they're concentrated more in the center of the city. And these are really, interestingly, the areas of the city which were annexed in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s. So in our age distribution, the chart on the left clearly shows the boomers over time with the different age cohorts. It's kind of that line that is moving to the right. And the little stage of life chart is just a way to kind of show how those age cohorts are kind of broken down by children, young adult, and seniors. So if we look at children, which is 24% of Arvada residents, and those are children 19 years of under, school-age children, you can see that that has been decreasing from 28.7% in 2000 to 24% now, but it still really is a substantial portion, you know, with 1/4 of our residents being children. And then as we look at millennials, this is how we compare with the other cities. Centennial and Highlands Ranch are the communities with fewer millennials than we have, but our millennial population seems to be increasing. In 2015, that number was 20%. So we're seeing an increase there. Oops. And this is where the millennials are living. They're basically in what we can call the older or original parts of Arvada, in those neighborhoods which are coincidentally closer to Old Town, which I think is really a large attractor from the millennial population. So to take a look at the Hispanic and Latino residents, this is where we compare. 14.4% of our population is either Hispanic or Latino. They self-identify as such. And Boulder, Highlands Ranch, Centennial have less of a population. Thornton, Denver, and Aurora sort of lead the list on that. And our Hispanic population has been increasing over time. But what is interesting is that they have a very young median age, but that median age has been increasing as well. So the median age currently is 27.8 years of age. And that basically has to do because it also includes a lot of children within that group. Now these are two new charts from last year. The diversity index, that's really a term that's starting to be a little more popular because it really encapsulates race and ethnicity in one number. So to define this, it's really the likelihood that two persons chosen at random are different by either race or ethnicity. So our number there is 41, or 41%. So that's the race of two people, or the probability rather, of two people having a 41% chance of being a different race or ethnicity. So this number is becoming a little more popular to be used. This other chart here for the veteran population is of interest, that we do have the highest proportion of veterans amongst our peer cities at 10.2%. For households, we rank with about 2/3 family households, 1/3 family households. So we're in the proportion of higher family households for the cities in the region. But our one-person households constitute 27% of all households, and that has been increasing. That is a national trend. But if we combine the one- and two-person households, this makes up 64% of all households.
Quick question. Does that include apartments, or is that?
Yes,
Okay.
households, all
regardless
occupied
of,
households.
Okay.
Yeah. And a household, just through the definition as well too, it's one or more people living together that may or may not be related. So there seems to be a slight uptick in that. So it's just something to watch as well too. This is something to kind of flag, because we do have a high proportion of one- and two-person households compared to our peer cities. Our average household size, you can see how we rank. 2.49 is our average household size. Our average family size is 3.02. These have been declining really only slightly since about 2000. The numbers have been pretty consistent, actually. Now, with income and employment, with income, the good news is I think we've sort of, through the data, we've sort of shaken out some of that effect.
Nancy's got a question.
Excuse me, Loretta, I'm going to try to make comments and ask questions as you go through the categories, so I don't have to do it all the way at the end.
Oh, okay, sure.
So I have a question. Have we ever looked at the residents in Arvada, the longevity of residents in Arvada versus other cities? My gut feeling tells me, and I don't know because I haven't really researched it, but my gut feeling tells me that if we were to compare Boulder versus Arvada, certainly Boulder, but maybe even Westminster versus Arvada, that we would find, and I would love to know this because I think it has relevance to everything that we do in Arvada in comparison to other cities, to find out whether people stay here the longest in comparison to other cities. So in terms of longevity, have we ever looked at that?
Yes, we have, and that was something that was pointed out in last year's presentation, is that we have a very high proportion, the highest proportion of all the cities of residents that are Colorado born and also sort of local to the area. Like the movement in and out of the city is very low.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's in this report here.
That wasn't last year's report, though?
Yeah, in the PowerPoint, yes.
Okay, I'll look that up. Thank you, because I think that's very important information that we have to keep in the front of everything that we do, because I do think that it affects how people think about their city, and it affects how people think about change as well. And I think that's critical, especially when comparing to other cities. The other thing that I wanted to point out about is that even though the data says, I think it was 4.3%, let me see, yeah, 4.3% where Spanish was the common language spoken. What I found very interesting about this report is that 26% said they speak English less than very well. And so I think it's very important, as you pointed out in your report, that the implications for that would behoove us to think about looking at certain services and important communication strategies and take that into consideration, that even though only 4.3 speaks English. Their Spanish, they don't consider it comfortable. They're not, they say they speak it less than very well. The other thing that you have in the report on page 34 is you mentioned that there's a shift from ownership to rental housing or assisted living with increasing age. And I think that that has very strong implication for our housing, and I would love to see some more data on that, especially since we are a very aging population. And I think that everything relates to the aging. You mentioned about the households diminishing, the size of households. I mean, that's related to the aging.
Yeah, a perfect example of that is like I was given a tour today by the new owners of that Rawson Communities property there on 64th, just west of Sims. And it's an assisted living memory care facility, beautiful facility. I mean, and it's under new ownership of a nonprofit that I think is going to do a great job with it. But just that, having more and more of that in our community is obviously happening.
Absolutely. And we haven't talked about housing yet, but not only meeting the, can we meet the needs of that aging population where the households will be decreasing, the size will be decreasing? Can we, encourage development for homes or apartments or condominiums that would be good for multiple uses, for the millennials, for, people in different situations who actually have similar needs?
Well, ironically, a perfect example of that is Park Place in Old Town, which has really turned into a multicultural, multi-age housing establishment. So,
right.
Yep.
But I would like to see that more data on that, Loretta, as far as the renting, because I'm struggling with that a little bit. Thanks.
Certainly, can work on that. So with income, the good news is that income is going up, and I mentioned as well too the switch or the increasing comfort for using the 1-year American Community Survey data on this. So these numbers are sort of showing that the recession has the impact of the recession has kind of fallen off. So, which is very good news. So here is the comparison for the median household income as well as the median family income and how we rate compared to our peer cities. And what is interesting to take a look at is really the proportion of households with an income over $100,000. Now, granted, these numbers here are $100,000 in 2000 versus $100,000 in 2016. Does not adjust for those two numbers, but it still is to give an idea of the increase in families, or rather households, with higher incomes. And this map shows census block group, and the dark green colors, the two shades of darker green, show those households with an income of greater than 100,000.
Hey, Loretta, could you go back one slide, back to the one that shows the income? And I think it's interesting, I just wanted to point this out, it's interesting the growth of the households with income over $100,000 has been significant in that period of time. But the other two things that strike me that are significant is that the percentage of households that are very low income has gone down. In fact, since the recession, of course, it's been cut in half, and part of that can be attributed to the recession, but even pre-recession to now, that very low income has gotten to be less, and the 25,000 to 49,000, significantly below the average, that has dropped as well, both by pretty significant amounts.
Yeah, I saw that too, John, and I think what would be really helpful too, because we've had discussions or we've heard discussion on the lower income categories, is to understand that category in our city, because that is a very different category. I mean, if you look at our overall income levels for Arvada, we're very high, and even high compared to other cities. So who are the people that are struggling in Arvada? We really need to know more about them in terms of their makeup.
And I also think that people that make less than $25,000 can't afford to be a household in Arvada. And I think that's part of the problem.
Well, and I would add, we need to qualify these numbers, because also what's happened between 2010 and 2016 is Candelas and Line Rock, which has attracted a different income level. And then also the cost of living here in Arvada has gone up. So did we have transient households that did leave because they couldn't afford living here? So, you know, I don't think it's less because they were sitting here and they were making more money. I think it's less because they had to move elsewhere. It's just my opinion. And then the higher numbers just because how many homes? 4,500 homes showing up out west.
And that will go back to looking at migration in Arvada. And I think that's very important for another reason, because I just recently spoke to a long-term Arvada resident who is married. They're in the older age category, and they were the last people that I would have thought would move, and did, because they needed retirement housing that we couldn't provide here. So I think it's really important to look at that whole migration to see what's happening here.
Okay, so the map again for income, and then poverty levels. So this is good news here, because the data from last year, I had flagged children in poverty because the number was very high. That number has gone down quite a bit, as has the poverty level. So you can see with the chart on the left-hand side how we rate compared to the other cities. Highlands Ranch and Centennial are the only cities below us for both people in poverty and families in poverty. And you can see the decrease in those two numbers between 2015 and 2016. Another thing too is in Arvada employment, and this can be a measure as well too of who is coming into the city. Between 2000 and 2011, 2015, the management, business, science, and arts occupations increased from 36% to 42%, and there was also a decline in sales and office. And then the report that has the income numbers for those two categories as well too. So the management, business, science, and arts category does have a higher income. Now, switching to slightly different data sets here, this is census as well as Bureau of Labor Statistics. Basically, people employed in Arvada, it's under 26,000. And what is of interest, though, is that large green bubble, the almost 50,000 people. That represents 91.2% of Arvada residents who work, and those who are the people who commute to work outside of Arvada. It's the same commuting pattern that's been held for about the last 10 years or so, with people commuting primarily to Denver, 25%, Lakewood, 12%, and after Arvada at 9%, 5% to Westminster. And that makes up about 50% of where people travel to.
Excuse me, Loretta, did you go through the housing yet?
No, there's housing that's coming up.
Okay.
It's in a different order than...
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we don't have a copy of your PowerPoint that you're doing tonight, right?
It was not in the packet, no.
I've got 2 copies of the report and no copy of the PowerPoint. So it's a little tricky following along.
Yeah, because you're going through employment right now, right?
That's right.
Okay.
It's for the labor inflow and outflow.
Okay.
Actually, that is in the transportation section, so.
Which one?
Oh, the previous graph.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you finished with employment yet? Or are you still working on that one? Because I have I want to ask questions as they relate to the sections. That's.
With employment, I'm basically finished. Do you have a question on that?
I do. I'm holding my spot for housing. Hold on. I think I do.
And she's got a lot of little pink notes in there.
I do. I have to do that now. No, the only thing I just noticed was that, most of the jobs were along the transportation corridors, and I thought that was very important in terms of future, trying to get future major employers in the city and where they would be.
I have a quick question while she's looking. Do you mind, Nancy?
No, I'm done.
Oh, okay.
I'm ready for the next subject.
Well,
so.
just a question, and maybe I missed it, but was there any thought around virtual office or working from home?
Well, that's actually the chart is not in the presentation, but it is in the report in the transportation section.
In the transportation.
And our teleworking number currently is 6.4%, and that's increased by over 1%, like it was like 5.2 or something like that in the previous data set. So that has been increasing. The teleworking has been increasing.
Of course, I found it right when I opened it.
So with, even though there are people that are teleworking, we still have lots of vehicles per household. And of course, suburban communities have more vehicles per household than more urban centers. So you can just directly compare Arvadas with Denver's or Boulder's, for instance. And then the chart on the right-hand side sort of indicates how it's been shifting a little bit. We've had an increase in one-car households and an increase in three-car households, but a decrease in two-car households. Very slight, but still some information on that.
Hold on, Loretta, because I thought that was a very important section, actually, because in your report, you mentioned the decrease, but you didn't mention the fact that the 3 or more cars increased, and I thought that was important because if you look at the number of 2 cars, it was exactly 3%, pretty much, and that was the increase in the number of households that increased to 3 or more cars. And I'm wondering if that has to do with more families per household, that we're increasing to 3 cars versus 2 cars.
Or teenage drivers.
That's true, right. I still think it has implications, though, when we look at our development issues and we're talking about number of cars. Because we make a lot of statements at those meetings sometimes. We always refer to the number of cars in Arvada, and especially when we're looking at the transportation, the TOD, and we're building for less cars, but our statistics are not really showing that people have less cars. So I think it's important to point that out.
Right, but I'd just like to clarify that's overall, because this next slide does break out vehicles per household by tenure. So the large chart on the left is for all households in Arvada. 4% have no vehicle, 28.7% have 1 vehicle, 67.4% have 2 or more vehicles. But the green chart on the right, which is the owner-occupied, indicates that 1% no vehicles, 23% have 1 vehicle, 76% have 2 or more. So that's for the owner-occupied, which in our city is primarily single-family detached. But the renter-occupied households, 11% have no vehicle, 45% have 1, and 44% have 2 or more. So that's kind of an even split on that.
Still a high percentage, though, to have 2+ vehicles, and it's still a high percentage, 44%. I think we just should keep that in mind as we're looking at developments. Hmm? Yeah.
Okay.
So for housing,
Are we done with transportation?
Yep, we're back to housing now.
Okay, I have a couple of things then that I'd like to talk about as far as transportation.
Okay.
So in our report, we say that 2.8% take public transportation. And out of that 2.8% who take public transportation, I would like to know what's the relationship between those who take it and income. I think that that would be an important statistic to understand who exactly is taking public transportation.
right, that data is available.
Okay. The other thing is, let me see here. I have, let's see, how much more due to population? It talked about slightly more females than males who take public transportation, and I'm wondering, if that has to do with age.
Do we have that kind of breakdown?
Yes, the census does have that by age and income.
But it's not in this material?
It's not in the report.
Okay.
That's,
So you'll get that?
I can get that.
Thank you.
And then it says that while people of Hispanic or Latino origin make up about 16% of the commuters, they made up more of the workers using carpools and transit than non-Hispanic workers. And so I'm thinking, based on what you're saying here, that has more to do with income than race. That would be more.
That would be because of income, yes.
Okay. And then I just made a comment because there is that commute to work bar chart of 82.1% who drive alone. That was in 2000. 2011 to 2015, 81.8. That's not a significant change. And I guess I think I'm sure we're going to do that, but that's going to be an interesting number to look at after the train comes and to see how those changes. And do we have any information on statistics for Lakewood and Westminster in terms of the change that transit has made in terms of those driving alone versus those taking transit now? And I say Lakewood and Westminster specifically because I think of all the cities, they would probably relate most to us. I think Boulder, looking at the data here, is kind of off the charts because I think of the university. I think it's very difficult to compare university towns and their transit, what do I want to say?
To the rest of the
habits.
real world.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to, so I think, looking at Westminster and Lakewood, since they're so close, possibly even Wheat Ridge, that would be important.
Can look at those.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, move on to housing.
Housing. So this, we're in the same position as we were last year in all of these categories. But again, still to lay out where we rank in compared to our peer cities with detached single-unit housing compared to townhomes, which is 7.4%, the middle chart, as well as multifamily units at 21%. And just back to the single unit detached, that's 70.7% of all occupied units. And then to take a look at tenure from that grouping of all housing within the city, where it's 73% is owner occupied, 27% is renter occupied. The renter occupied, that's chart at the top right, basically 62% are apartments. The rest are divided up with single-family detached and townhomes. And for owner-occupied, 88% are single-family detached houses. And then townhomes and condos make up the rest of the housing types. Now, for housing
Loretta,
size,
excuse
sorry.
me for a second. I had a question about that. On page 47, when you talk about townhomes and condominiums, I was a little confused. So you say approximately 62% of renters live in apartments, 27% in single-family detached houses, 9% in townhomes, and 2% in duplexes. For renters, there's no mention of condos. Is there a reason for that?
Right, because condos are an owner-occupied. It's an ownership model.
Yeah, but some people rent out with condos.
I mean, I live in a condo complex. There are a lot of people.
I see what you mean.
There are people that rent there.
I guess census just doesn't break down to that level of data.
Because it does for owners, but it doesn't say for renters.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do have a question on the housing cost burden, because in your report you say that 77% of owner households spend less than 30% of household income on housing, while renters exceed this, with over half of renters spending more than 30% of income on housing. And I guess I look at what we're building in Arvada, and in terms of renting, we're building high-end, but we're not building, renting within that 30%. So we're actually causing that, I think, in some ways, right? I mean, by what we're building?
Yes, it is probably reflective of the market and the market rates. Also, it has to do with, the income level of renters as well, too. It's not as high as people who own a house, generally. And this information basically, too, is very similar for Jefferson County as a whole, too. So it's not just Arvada, it's the region. It's the county as well, too.
But what I'm saying is we're renting. I mean, if you look at what we're building right now in terms of the rentals, we're building high-end rentals only. I don't think we're building too many in comparison. Or tell me if I'm wrong. Are we building a lot of, what's the word?
Attainable.
Attainable, or not necessarily attainable, but or workforce. Is that the same? I mean, in proportion. So we're actually, we're actually promoting that in a sense, aren't we? The fact that these renters are paying a higher percentage of their income?
Yeah, if I can interject here, what you are seeing in our housing market is the market rate is higher, so the people that are living there typically are in the 40 and sometimes up to 50% of their income is spent on the rent. That's not unusual, though, in the rental market, because what people are doing there is paying for the amenities that are on site, too, that they're not paying for out of their pocket, such as fitness centers, some of the computer rooms, those kind of activities.
So that you're saying that's included in their rent?
Yes.
Whereas with owner occupied, it would be separated?
Right, and everything is split out. In a lot of our housing, keep in mind, a lot of people have lived here and they have mortgages from a long time ago. So they're making more income and their cost of mortgage is staying the same, so they have a lower percentage of their overall income that's accounted for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
I'll just back up one slide here, too. And just the point on this slide here is that Arvada household size For owner-occupied has been decreasing slightly, and for renter-occupied has been increasing a bit, but again, only slightly. So, in summary then, so overall, Arvada is doing very well. You know, there are really no outstanding issues. The children in poverty issue seems to be, you know, comfortably under control, although poverty is something just still will always be tracking. So we are doing very well that way. We can expect a change in our neighborhoods. We have some of these neighborhoods that were built in the 1960s and the 1970s with the original householders. So there can be a change as they age out. And the millennials and the Gen Xers are interested in having family houses and family-oriented neighborhoods. So several of the indicators are consistent with the previous year, especially our commuting patterns, our travel time, pretty much the same. Household income, family income is increasing. There is a need for affordable housing, increasing diversity with Hispanic, Latino population, but the big thing is really the growth of the senior population and their specific needs for housing, transportation, and additional services in that area. So for the next steps, there will be another update on trends a year from now in December 2018. And I can certainly address the comments that were made today and kind of do a supplement and get that to you quite quickly then. So I guess there's just another question then. If you have some other things that you would like to prepare for you in advance of your retreat, I'd be happy to do that.
Other questions from council? Any other questions? Go ahead, Nancy.
I was just mentioning to Bob that, you know, it's really important to look at, because I was kind of, I'm just trying to find it now in terms of the transportation, where it really, the amount of time that it takes in doing public transportation versus driving alone. Oh, here it is, I found it. It said, you know, those choosing public transit have recorded an average commute time that is double the time of driving alone at approximately 54 minutes. They said that the average was 27 minutes. And, you know, I think that's a really important, that's on page 66.
Well, and I saw a report recently that talked about Colorado as a whole in commute time, some ungodly amount of like 44 million hours spent sitting in traffic for the entire state in 1 year, which equates to, you know, millions and millions and millions of dollars of resource time sitting on the highway system. So I mean, it's a big problem. But yeah, I'll take a look at that too.
Yeah, a couple things I think you're going to see. Obviously, you know, the G line I think will help in that regard, because particularly as the construction happens on I-70 and the slowdown that's going to create. So hopefully, you know, that will be much more efficient than the bus service traditionally has been from Arvada.
I mean, I think that's not so much for Arvada as it is for RTD, but I mean, I think it's an important stat, because as long as convenience is not there, you know, I think convenience really affects
most
people.
Certainly. Yep.
You know, and as Bob says, it has to do with, you know, money, time and money. Time is money, and
and I do think you're going to see a dramatic increase in telecommuting. I mean, I just think that you know, I've got a son-in-law who works 100% from home in the and it's just, you know, making mega bucks and not having to deal with commuting. Sounds pretty attractive to me. If I could figure out how to do court work in my slippers and pajamas, it would be great.
It's going to be done by television eventually, right? Or something.
I'll tell you, I'm going to the Consumer Electronics Show next month to look at vehicles that are designed to be autonomous and you work the whole time. So the thought is you're going to be going to work wherever, but you'll have screens and you'll be on your laptop, and so they're saying, well, you recover that productivity when you have taken away the driving element.
Well, wasn't the quarterback from San Diego commuting he had a driver, but you know, he had this nice van that he could watch his tape study all the way up to LA from San Diego.
I'll send you the link to
Right. Good. Okay, anything else from anyone? Loretta, thank you. Let's, perhaps in the future, if we could get the PowerPoint, it would help us be a little bit more efficient in what we're trying to do up here, studying it. But very good, good information.
It was.
Mr. Devon, anything else we have before us tonight?
No.
Okay, we stand adjourned.